Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Lisa Schwartz with ITSM Academy. If you know me, you know how fired up I am about employee experience, and I believe XLAs are the way forward. At the Academy, we are very vendor neutral because we really need to be. But me, Lisa Schwartz, I'm a fan of HappySignals. I'm a fan of their management team and all their employees. And I'm the biggest fan of our speaker today, Zachary. I am not going to try to pronounce his last name because he literally, I've known him for years. I asked him today. He literally said to me, nope, only Finnish people can pronounce it. So Zachary, I've decided I want to be successful. I'm not even going to try. We've got a couple of polls. I'm going to get the first poll rolling as people are still coming in. And our question number one, do you have experience as a KPI for service desk? And it's yes, no, or unsure. And thank you guys for answering these. As you know, many of you are returning guests. This really does help our speaker sort of massage the information that he's going to share with us today. So everyone's voted yet, but I'm always anxious to get going. So got a pretty good sampling. I'm going to go ahead and share the results on that, Zachary. And as you can see,
Yeah.
62% no, 31% are at yes, and 8% are unsure. And let me go ahead and throw up poll number two. Well, I would. Back. Here we go. Sorry about that. So, Zachary, if you would, well, poll number two, I'm going to officially pass it over to you. If you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're talking about, and we'll show the results of poll two. And I will then take myself off screen, and I will be back at the end for question and answers. We actually even had a couple of free questions, so that's always great. So, how were service desk KPIs, SLAs, XLAs created? By IT, business approves. We don't have KPIs. So, Zachary, I'm going to leave that up if you want to get rolling.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for having me today, Lisa and Nina at ITSM Academy. So my name is Sakari Kyrö. That's how the Finnish people pronounce it, and the last name is indeed very difficult and it's sort of a tongue twister. So, and I don't get offended if people pronounce it differently. Just go with whatever feels good. So I'm working for a company called HappySignals that was founded over 10 years ago now with the understanding that maybe in IT, the way that services were being developed and the way that services were being measured didn't really focus on the humans as much as they did on the technology and the IT's internal needs. And as you have been in, many of you have been in other ITSM Academy webinars, you know how important being an employee-centric or human-centric or customer-centric, whatever you want to use as a term there, how important that is. And today's webinar is about a topic that is very close to my heart. The benchmark report was one of the first responsibilities that I got at HappySignals when I started about 5 years ago. I had already for years been interested in understanding how these different types of metrics that would reflect on the experience of people, the well-being of people, could be tied back to business result and business action, business decisions. So the benchmark report has now been going on since 2019. There have been 12 of them, and over the years that it has expanded in scope in the questions that it treats. It has also gone from being a quarterly report to a half-yearly report to now being a yearly report. And in today's presentation, we'll be looking at results from over 2 million responses from end users. And these responses have been collected from enterprises that have more than 1,000 employees across 130 countries. And with this, let's get the presentation going. Do you have anything to add, Lisa?
I'm just going to say, speaking of results, we have the results from poll number two up. And our leader is by IT, business approves, which I don't think is shocking. What I am a little bit shocked at is the 13% that said we don't have KPIs, but that's a conversation for another day. I'm going to stop sharing of that. And as I said, I'm still here, but I will be back on video at the end. Thank you again, Zachary.
All right, thank you. So as we start, let's look back in time a little bit. In 2021, many of you have probably seen this statistic that Gartner said that by 2025, 50% of the organizations will have established a digital employee experience strategy, team, and management tool, up from less than 5% in 2021. And at that time, XLAs as a term, in their hype cycle, were at the peak of inflated expectations. And what is the situation now that we are in 2025? You can think about this hype cycle, and if you don't know how it works, it is that new things are being introduced to the market. They innovation trigger phase, they go to the peak of inflated expectations, and then as maybe some of the hype wears away, they go into this phase called throw of disillusionment before then becoming more standardized and reaching eventually the plateau of productivity. So in 2021, Gartner predicted that 50% of the companies would have XLAs or digital employee experience strategies in place by 2025. Now we're in 2025. Last fall, there was a very interesting research done by Didi Mishra from Gartner, where they looked at the XLAs, especially in the outsourced service provider relationships. And they found that there were maybe some discrepancies. Maybe were a little bit of a crack starting to show. Sorry. So one of the reasons why cracks started to show is that providers often disguised legacy SLAs as XLAs for clients, driving the wrong perception about the effectiveness of XLAs. And you can read into it, driving the wrong perception about experience management, about the importance of XLAs and experience in general. And this is actually something that then is very important that HappySignals also has been focusing on since the beginning, because the reasons why different service providers or different entities would be defining XLAs as in their ways, in maybe ways that are not so human-centric, would be maybe misaligned incentives and misaligned understanding about what XLAs are and what experience is. And one of the things is that as the people in this webinar, I assume that just about all of you are working in IT, so you are both consumers and producers of IT. Now, if you ask yourself, as a consumer of IT, an employee of an enterprise, how would you rate your experience with IT? And when I have asked these questions in different sessions for companies, sometimes IT teams will say that, well, when I rate my most recent experience with IT was, for example, a problem with the software or a laptop or a service, whatever it is. And my experience was, I thought that it took too long. Maybe the communication wasn't so clear how things are going, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. So it wasn't really a good experience. So they start speaking in terms of I felt, I perceived, my expectations, etc. But then when they are as service producers, then they set KPIs. They will set those KPIs in a way that they fix them to the maybe traditional SLAs. Maybe they fix them to some sort of technical metrics. And all of a sudden they shift their point of view from being what they themselves as consumers would use as a definition of experience to something that as a producer they feel that they can control more. And thinking about this is actually one of the ways that as an IT professional, you can sanity check any experience initiatives or experience metrics that you might have in place. Would I, as a consumer of IT, look at this metric and say, yes, I agree, this is a reflection of my experience, the way that I would define it as a consumer. And a lot of times as you reflect on these type of things, you might even notice that there are small discrepancies in the way that you define experience as a producer or a provider of IT services and as a consumer. And one of the keys to then avoiding having different types of definitions in place at the same time, and then leading to what Gartner had found with those cracks in the surface of experience management programs, XLAs, having a single, coherent, and comparable way of speaking about experience becomes important. There can be the definition between companies might differ, the definition between different vendors might differ, but having one way that is standardized across the whole organization does help in the conversations when you start speaking about what does good look like. And that is what HappySignals data has been since the beginning, since 10 years. It has been standardized. It has been the benefits and trade-offs of having a standardized approach versus a customized approach for different parts of IT. And we believe that it is more important to have a standardized way in order to have that comparable data. So all the data that I will be presenting today has been gathered from surveys that end users have responded to, and they are all of our customers respond to the same type of surveys. They do not customize them in order to have this benchmark data readily available. One of the first things that we also a few years ago started noticing is that the practices that IT has in terms of continual service improvement and using experience data, IT is often the pioneer within large enterprises. And as IT is good at putting in place processes and putting in place the technical capabilities to do these things in a systematic and scalable way, then they start showing results of experience management to the rest of the organization, and HR might get interested. Maybe finance services start getting interested, facilities. And when we looked at the data now among our customers, among which about 25% do non-IT measurement as well, we noticed that the happiness level between different services remains pretty similar between different departments, but the lost time doesn't. And it's quite interesting to see that finance services actually loses per incident ticket that is raised 4 hours and 40 minutes compared to the 3 hours and 14 minutes, which is the average for IT services. What those reasons are, we will get back to in future benchmark reports, but just to show that the same scalable, comparable approach can also be spread across to other departments if they would have the appetite and interest in doing so. But looking at IT, let's look at a few different measurement areas or different touch points that we measure. When we ask companies that do not do experience management, what do you think is the most positive in terms of experience area of IT, and what would be the most negative? A lot of times, because of the reputation of service desk and IT support being a visible part of IT, they say, well, we think probably IT services would be an incident management, request management. Those would be the lowest rated ones. But in our data, we see that consistently they are among the highest ones. And in the last year's benchmark data, it was the highest scoring ones. So incident management and request management score a +78 on a scale that goes from -100 to +100, which is calculated the same way as the NPS score. And those services, while they might be services that you only need when something goes wrong or when it is something new, still it is something that shapes the overall experience of enterprise employees with IT in a very large way. So having good ITSM practices in place does have a huge positive impact on the overall IT experience that employees have. The second part is remote work, and remote work used to be even higher than the service piece, but now in the last couple of years there have been increasingly these back to the office mandates being put into place in enterprises. And while it was working really well, companies have gone back a little bit to not allowing so much for remote work anymore. And we can see that in our results that the scores are going down. Is there a direct relationship between these policies being put in place and our scores? We don't know, but the two have happened at the same time. But the other ones here, you have collaboration with IT, which is also highly rated, and it goes down with mobile devices, laptops and computers and enterprise applications being at the lower end of the scale here. But as we speak about overall IT, this year we also looked at open text comments that are being given in the context of overall IT service that our customers send out. And it was very interesting to see that even as you ask about the overall IT, 47%, and this is done through an analysis of topics with AI tools, 47% of end users answered that when IT develops things, they should be focusing on developing IT support. So among all the different gadgets, applications, devices, all the different areas of IT that they could be focusing on, end users do feel, and even in the open text comments say, when asked what should IT focus on, they say focus on IT support. So it has a crucial and very, very important part in making people happy with IT, giving them a good experience by making sure that the IT support services receive the attention that they deserve. And looking at ticket-based IT services then, there are looking at incidents and requests. These have been pretty similar over the years, with incidents often being slightly lower than requests. And maybe this is explained by the fact that there are two different types of situations. In incidents, something has gone wrong, you need help to fix it. While in request, you're asking to get something and you get that request fulfilled. But these are still pretty close to each other and haven't really changed. Like the relationship between the two, the scores have been going up year after year as people in the IT organizations are using the experience data systematically to improve the services. But this relationship has remained roughly the same, that requests slightly higher than incidents in terms of happiness. But just being happy with IT services is not all. We also measure lost time, and lost time as it relates to perceived lost time. And then after each incident, the end users that fill out the service that we send out can pull a slider where they are asked, how much work time did you lose with this incident? And then they slide it, and the scale goes from 5 minutes until 5 days. And a couple of years ago, and this data has been double-checked since, we noticed that Pareto's law on steroids is happening when it comes to the data, when it comes to the experience data, when it comes to the perceived lost time per incident. 80% of the lost time comes from only 13% of the tickets that people submit. And we have been looking into what this could be caused by, and later on today I will show you a couple of graphs that compared the perceived lost time to mean time to resolve. But to highlight what these graphs are built out of, a lot of times as we think about SLAs and then experience metrics, IT has been really good at making sure that easy tickets are being solved really quickly. Over the years now that automation capabilities have become better, as the different intelligent systems and approaches have become more common in IT organizations, you do see that tickets are being solved quicker and quicker. And we see that in terms of number of tickets that are being solved very quickly, so where people say that they lose less than 1 hour of work time with an incident, they now are 69% of the tickets. And these are great automation candidates as well for IT, because a lot of times you will still have things like password resets, maybe some approval processes, etc., that could be automated if just given a little bit of attention, and that way getting rid of those tickets overall. But at the other end of the thing, where people say that they lose more than 2 days of working time, these are high impact tickets, even if they are not large in terms of the number of tickets that are being submitted. And we have seen that when you go into the details of when people say that they lose a significant amount of productivity per incident, it's often the type of tickets that get maybe put on hold, maybe get prematurely closed because it's a problem that maybe the agents or the IT organization sees, oh, that's not a nice ticket to solve. That's going to be, don't want to touch it. It's poison. We don't want to touch it. So let's put it aside. Or things that get forgotten. And these 13% of tickets, they are actually the ones that then cause 80% of the lost time as perceived by the end users. And this is a very fascinating topic as you go into the data and you have availability to drill down into the categories where that happens. And one area where this can easily happen is when teams look at the responsibility of who should be solving these tickets. And reassignments are often the first place to go to. Every single time a ticket gets reassigned, the happiness drops by roughly 10 points and the lost time increases by something like 2 hours. And by the time that a person has a ticket that has been reassigned 4 or 5 times, they're already perceiving to lose more than a full working day of productive work time. So But this is a topic I could speak about very, very long, so feel free to contact me as well for more explanations around this. But then looking at context, because while companies are nowadays standardizing their IT service management processes across very wide and very varying environments, we can still see that especially in a global scale, then there are differences in how those services are being rated. We know from a benchmark data that Western Europe is notoriously difficult to please or to get the high scores out of. And as I think that a lot of the participants in the webinar today are from the US, the way that we see in American end users rate services is often that you would give a 10 out of 10 or a 5 out of 5 or the highest score if nothing goes wrong. It's sort of like the expectation is that you give the highest score if everything went good enough. But if you go to, for example, to Germany or Netherlands, they're the same service, the same experience, objectively seen, will be rated maybe a 7 or an 8, because in those countries, the way that they perceive the right score in quotation marks to be for a good service, 7 or an 8 is already really good. Looking at the scores then, if you are providing and trying to standardize an IT service across a global estate of different locations, you might then, just looking at the scores, start thinking that we are not doing as well in Western Europe as we are doing in North America or doing as well as we're doing in Asia because of the cultural differences in how IT services and how experience is being rated. So having available to comparable benchmark data like this can also help to then understand that, all right, maybe we shouldn't get complacent in this one location where we already have a plus 85 in scores because actually the benchmark in those locations is over 90. Or maybe we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves for getting plus 65 in Germany when actually maybe the benchmark average for that location is just plus 60 or something like that. And the differences can be quite big, and especially then when you look at also the lost time part. And if you look at North America, in North America, the same plus 80 score will come when people perceive losing 3 hours and 23 minutes on average per incident, while in Africa, for example, the same plus 80 corresponds to a 5 hours and 30 minutes of lost time per incident. So what benchmark data gives you is context so that you can then better understand where actually you should be putting the efforts to reach the type of levels that in those locations could be seen as the standard and zone of good enough, etc. But locations are not the only thing that matters for experience. We also know that industry matters a lot. So in the last few years, when we were looking into the industries of companies that use HappySignals to capture experience, finance and insurance have been at the top many times. And the employees of these organizations are often sitting most of the day in front of a computer. They might, in many cases, have access to local IT support close to their office, maybe in the same office, which means that it's much easier to feel like you can get quick support, you can get expert support, and you know that the people that are working maybe as internal IT teams know your context and know your needs in a better way than if you would be working in retail where IT is far away in a different location and the only way to contact them is through a shared computer in a warehouse or something like that. So also understanding the differences between industries makes it easier to start thinking about where do we focus, what would be the zone of good enough, and what should we be happy with, and where should we focus our resources. But the industry is one thing. Then we look at if you have internal IT or you have outsourced IT. What typically happens is when companies start using HappySignals, if they have internal IT, is that they will start from a higher score. And outsourced service providers are often starting from a lower point when it comes to experience. But because of the way that things are built up in processes, clearly systematic ways of working, if they get serious with the experience data and start using it for continuous service improvement on a day-to-day basis, they're often faster to then progress when it comes to raising that experience score and diminishing that lost time per incident. but they're still fighting more of an uphill battle than the ones that have internal IT. And then company size matters. I always found it fascinating to think how even in companies with 5,000 employees, you're already so big that you are working in a large enterprise where you uh, might not even have met, I don't know, not even 10% of your colleagues over a career. But we can see that the happiness with IT services goes down as the company size goes up. And it's a combination of factors that may play into this. One of the things is that as you go bigger and bigger and you start having tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees, it is more likely that you have a more complex IT environment with more external IT service providers. And with complexity comes the difficulty of then providing a sort of top level experience for the employees that they would feel would be as good as in the smaller ones where maybe the internal IT team still do much of the work and are visible to the end users in a different way. I'll just pause for just a little moment with the presentation and look at the questions if there's anything. My neck hurts because I'm nodding in agreement so hard. Thank you, Lisa. Just to answer your question, Rocky, yes, there is the questions are there. But continuing on with the presentation. Now we have looked at context when it comes to geographic differences. We have looked at context when it comes to industry. We have looked at context when it comes to internal versus external, and we have looked at context when it comes to company size. Let's go even more granular. Let's look at the individual employees that you're providing services for. And Lisa will recognize, and the ones that are part of the open service community will recognize the next few slides. We often think about like the individual users as what would their needs be. We might use personas or we might use profiles. And user personas and profiles are not the same thing. User personas are often hypothetical representations of different end users that will then be used in order to provide the services that are adapted to them. They're useful, but they don't fully tell the whole story. And I love this picture that I found online. You can, if you look for a persona, King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, you will find variations of this picture. Both are male, both are born in 1948, both were raised in the UK, both were married twice, both live in a castle, both are wealthy and famous. But if you think about providing IT services to Ozzy Osbourne or King Charles, you might quite instinctively know that you maybe should be providing different services, or maybe not. But what HappySignals did, and I think that this has been a very interesting thing to follow how these profiles have evolved, is that in 2019, before the profile questions that we will be looking at next were put into place, HappySignals involved professional psychologists to do 500 interviews with enterprise employees to understand what are the type of attributes that would be useful for IT to understand when it comes to customizing and optimizing and adjusting their services to different types of end users. And the goal was to have something that would be very simple for the end users. And in our surveys, every 6 months or so, after incidents have been resolved, the same survey also contains 2 questions. How would you describe your IT skills? Do I often need help with IT? Do I really need help with IT? Or maybe one of those people in the office that is known for their IT savviness and help other people. The second question is, when I have a problem with my IT tools, I most likely try to solve it by myself, maybe using Google, YouTube, whatever resources there are, knowledge-based articles to find the solutions to my problems. Do I just contact support, or do I ask the colleague, the IT savvy friend that is sitting next to me in the office, to ask him if he knows how to solve my problem? And this provides the IT organization with a view of these profiles and the relative happiness differences between them, as well as the relative lost time differences between them. And the way that the profiles are then done is that you have 2 axes. What is your confidence and skill with IT? And what is your preference to solving issues? You might be a person that, like the doers, that both know how to fix problems and they're happy to do it. You might be a prioritizer, which means that you know how to fix the problems, but you don't want to do it yourself. You're going to contact IT right away. The supported, they know that they don't know how to do it, so they want IT to do it for them. While the triers, they're the ones that will tinker around with settings. They will maybe try different things, probably make things a little bit worse before contacting IT and say, "Look, I didn't really manage, but can you help me solve it?" And the triers also love learning, so there's a great place to provide good training materials for them. But understanding the differences between these over a whole estate of different customers in HappySignals, the most common profile are the doers. They're also the most critical one, the hardest to please. And one of the reasons why these are customers or end users are hard to please is that by the time that they contact IT support, they already have done a lot of the things that maybe are included in the IT support scripts for incidents to ask, did you restart your computer? Did you update the software to the latest versions? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And the doer will be sitting on the other side or reading the email and be like, of course I did. I know how to use computers. I know these things. So they're difficult to deal with, but at the same time, through automation, if you know who is a doer, you could just direct them directly to level 2 support because they probably tried everything that level 1 support would be asking them to try. And prioritizers, often people in leadership positions that don't have the time to fix problems, don't send these people to knowledge base article. They don't want to solve the problems themselves. They want IT to solve it for them. And same thing with supported and triers. There are ways to optimize the services, and we had a presentation about this in the open services community a couple of weeks ago. And if you want more information about how you can customize your services based on profiles, feel free to reach out. And that presentation is also available online, and we can put a link to that afterwards. And you remember we looked at regional differences in support profile, not in support profile, but in experience. Part of that is explained by the fact that the support profile distribution is not equal across all regions. If we look at, for example, North America, 60% of the end users in North America are doers. While if you would go over to Asia, for example, it's only 34%. So understanding also how you can adjust IT services and different rules for how tickets are being routed to which teams or to which knowledge base articles, having this data combined within your IT service management tools, you can get smart about how resources are being used and at the same time provide a better experience that meets the expectations that end users would have when they contact support. So as you can see, there's a lot of different aspects that influence IT experience, and understanding the context in all these different aspects is possible, but having a comparable and standardized way of measuring experience will be the key. Because once you start understanding the differences on a comparable basis, you're also much better equipped to answer critical questions from the business. But we asked the question in this way. We would have preferred to ask it in this way. The moment you start having different questions, different scales, different ways of approaching the customers in different moments, that's the moment when you start losing the comparability, and then the experience data and the experience initiatives where the data is being used as justification to invest start becoming more hard to defend. So while you might be losing out a little bit on the feeling of being able to optimize everything for every single scenario with having a standardized approach, what you gain on the other hand is a way of saying, hey, this is one way of doing it for all. So we know that while it might not be exactly what you want, Mr. Stakeholder, Mrs. Stakeholder, it is still something that is comparable across all of the different areas of IT, so that we can start making decisions and prioritization across the different areas of IT as well. And then we had a couple of questions. Let me just stop and go back to the chat. I see it's buzzing with questions there, so just taking a short break to see. Let's see. So maybe I'll take the first question here that came from Rocky is about how can organizations start their ITXM journey with what tools they have? What are the key steps you would recommend, and when is the time to purchase a new tool? What tips do you have for showing value proposition to C-suite folks? So when it comes to the tooling, you have already today different tools available in the market, and depending a little bit on the company size and the scope that you would want to choose for the experience management initiatives in the beginning, you don't necessarily have to go for a dedicated tool like HappySignals, even if it is easy to implement and everything. And of course, uh, the approach is already plug and play, so you don't have to think about the questions, get all the red tape cut, and all the stakeholders to agree on questions and methodology. But I would say that one of the most important things is just to sit down with the stakeholders to start defining on what the initial goals are. And this is in the same way as the ITSM Academy and different people uh, in their approach to XLAs, there is this definition of what is the ambition that we're trying to achieve, and start with areas where you know the stakeholders and end users would be the most likely to embrace experience-centric initiatives the most. It can be quite discouraging if you go into an area of IT where there is very little appetite to be human-centric, experience-centric, and then see the first steps of experience management to start failing. So starting small, building momentum, finding quick wins, and doing it in a systematic way with curiosity is, I think, one key thing. And you can do that with almost any survey tools that are available, depending on the scale and scope of the initiative that you're putting in place. And I'm happy to have a call afterwards to just show like what are the core principles that we have built our surveys around. And maybe one of the principles is just that think from the end user's perspective. If you have to pick sides, pick the side of the end user, not the IT organization. So something that might seem logical to IT may not be logical for the end user. So always put yourself, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, in the position of the consumer of IT services rather than the producer of IT services. And a lot of times that helps us to avoid bias that we might even ourselves be unaware of. And then a second question was here. Let's see. Lot of questions here, but how can we get doers to open their ticket and update the steps they tried, or leverage AI to track the journey to mitigate the need or repeat steps of questions, remove the friction? So the doers can be really great. And I loved a workshop that Matt Barron did at the Pink 25 last year, where he was talking about, for example, how they designed service portals when they went to customers, and they involved the end users in defining what the articles and the content on those pages would be. So doers, because they are very knowledgeable in the IT skills, maybe one of the ways to get them to open the ticket and update the steps they tried is to also involve them through focus groups or other ways to look at articles. Is this article actually meeting your expectations, etc.? And if you do that with a couple of doers that are a little bit more tech savvy, maybe you end up creating an article that can serve hundreds or thousands of other doers in the organization over time at the level that is appropriate for them. But once again, it's more about not assuming things about people, but actually getting involved and getting curious about what are the drivers, what are the areas of improvement that they feel are the most important. Let's see if there's other questions here. Regional difference. Have you guys sliced the data looking at pre-COVID 2019 and today? Any insights into if we wouldn't have had a pandemic? One thing that we did notice with pre-COVID 2019 and today is that which factors were being chosen when people were asked about remote work. In the beginning of the pandemic, or the remote work survey was being launched by HappySignals, and the one of the things was that in the beginning, people were more concerned about the technical aspects. I don't have the right equipment. I don't have the right ergonomics at home. I don't have the VPN connection. It's not working well, etc. But as IT fixed all of those sort of basic needs to get the home office to be as efficient and as productive as the office environment, at that time, people then shifted into saying, we don't have the right practices. We are not being the remote working ways, contacting colleagues, etc. That became the issue. So you could see how it's almost like this Maslow hierarchy of needs was happening in the pre-COVID and during COVID and after COVID, where you need to have those basic requirements being done right before you can start getting into the ways of working, collaboration, communication, etc. So let's see, are there other questions here in the chat now? Is the increased use of chatbots and AI agent influencing people's perception that companies need to work on IT support? And if yes, how? Well, we looked into, and we have been asked by our customers quite many times that, can you help us measure which AI agents would be actually helping them in IT support situations and which AI agents do not. And one of the things that we can see is that a lot of times the IT organizations would want to push the whole process of IT support into to the bot and just sort of externalize the responsibility of getting those tickets solved and trust the bot. There is a drive to do that pretty quickly. End users, on the other hand, the most common thing that we see our customers change when they start developing the bots is that they make it easier to get through to a human if the persons would want that. And when we look at, for example, like the profiles of supported, if you have a lot of people that are supported or prioritizers, it doesn't matter if it's an AI bot or a knowledge-based article, they will still not want to do the problem solving themselves. They want to contact IT, they want to get across to IT so that the issue can be solved. So then it becomes, again, a way of getting creative around the information that you're looking at and the data to understand which parts of the support, which parts of the request management, which part of the incident management can you push to the bot, and how can you make it still easy for end users to then get across to a human being when they need that. So I know it probably sounds self-explanatory, but how many of you have, as consumers, once again, been speaking to a customer service bot in your personal life and just been hitting the keyboard like, get me to a human, get me to a human. All you want is somebody to speak to you so they can actually explain your problem without being prompted with the options that may or may not feel like they're very relevant to you. So I think it's still the AI in terms of the adoption of agents and perception of AI agents. People know that it's still pretty much a hit and miss, and there are very few companies that actually have implemented AI bots that would be universally loved. But one thing that was interesting to notice is that we did look at different bots and how different bots between each other, what the ratings were. And we did see that, for example, in our customer base, MoveWorks as an AI agent being implemented was the one that was scoring slightly higher than competitive alternatives from some of the other companies. But that's just anecdotal at the moment. The data is still pretty small, so it's take it with a pinch of salt. Then we spoke about, there was a question also around SLAs and balancing SLAs and XLAs and how these metrics are then set by the organization. And I want to show you something that we thought was quite interesting. You know now that HappySignals measured lost time as perceived lost time, not as something that sort of is more objective as MTTR or any other metric that is measured with a specific timestamp that is getting opened and closed. So a couple of years ago, we looked deeper into the data and we looked at business criticality and then ticket open time. And why business criticality? Because we wanted to understand the relationship between the score that people give and the lost time. And the interesting finding was that when you look at the scores given in HappySignals, a low score systematically had almost systematically had a high lost time, and it went down as things went on. But then when you looked at mean time to resolve and the scores, it was sort of quite interesting. So what you see is that the tickets that are open the longest are the ones that receive 2s and 3s, not the 0s and 1s. And I think this graph speaks to what we were speaking about earlier in terms of the Pareto's principle with the 13% of tickets that cost 80% of the lost time. The thing is that maybe there are tickets here that get zeros and ones, where IT prematurely closes the tickets because they know that they can't solve them or get a good resolution for it. So they're open a short time and therefore also get a low score, because for the end user, it feels like you didn't even try. While then at the same time, the lost time for the ones where they get a 10 actually then reflects that the problem was solved once and for all, and there was almost no time lost. So there are all these kinds of, if you're a data geek and you like sort of digging into the data that explains these different seeming discrepancies or seeming contradictions in the data, I mean, that's the place where I find the most insights. Like, why would somebody give a high score and like the ticket has been open a long time or a short time? Why would somebody lose a lot of time and still give a high score? And there are all these types of like nuances to the benchmark data that I don't have time to go into today, but I'm happy to discuss in follow-up meetings. And maybe then the last thing was a question in the beginning on the poll was that how do you set your KPIs? And this is one of the aspects where it's interesting to think about, are you aligning the complex IT environment priorities to then be measured through the outcomes or the SLAs? And one of the things that when it comes to SLAs or some of the more operational level metrics is that while they are very important up to a certain level in IT, once you get up to views of how the division is doing, how is the organization doing, etc., does it really reflect the service quality and the outcomes that the organization is trying to achieve? But anyways, I'm maybe getting off track now and time is running out. So I'll just leave this key findings page up here and I'll return to the questions to see if there's any other questions that need answering. Sorry, like that. Trying to figure out Zoom.
Great. I am here and I am looking too. It looks to me you got all the outstanding. Um, yeah.
There's one question there that is very interesting. It's that how can you leverage XLAs to systematically measure organizational change management and help drive change adoption across your organization? Have you seen any success stories in this area? And this is one which relates a little bit back to how do you speak to senior stakeholders? Because a lot of times, in order to get the senior leadership to buy into experience management, you maybe need some sort of anecdote that they can relate to. And when you find that one senior, like a VP maybe, that needs to give a green light or give the sponsorship to these type of initiatives, if you know that they had an issue where the current metrics didn't reflect his experience as a human being and as an end user, if you can tag on to that and say that you had this experience, you're not alone. This is happening thousands of times across the organization all the time. And by measuring experience, while it is a soft metric especially in sometimes in more engineering minded people's eyes, it is still something that everyone can relate to. You can relate to it as a consumer of IT services. And if you can get that understanding that experience is reflecting that human side, and you have had experiences where you would have rated services in this type of way, finding those anecdotes that appeal to senior leadership often are the key to then also get the sponsorship to the organizational change management and using XLAs and experience management to drive those and get that comparable data over time.
Yeah, I thought that one of the most interesting things I've heard you say today, and I've seen you present on this before. I've been following the benchmark, as you know, since the very first publication. But the mindset of when I am receiving the service versus when I am creating the service, what you said there to me was really a good light bulb moment. And so my follow-up question for you is, of all this data and all the things that you guys have learned, because I think the first time I saw the report, I want to say it had 12,000 responses, right? And now it's whatever, 3 million. What have you guys found to be the most surprising?
I think one of the things that bothered us, in a good way, was that we saw year after year the happiness go up in for incidents and requests and these IT service management related areas. But at the same time, the lost time was also going up in our data. So we're wondering like, why is that happening? But we realized that actually like this is also one of those things where the right things were happening, but they were reflected in an unexpected way in the data. IT organizations were automating those easy tickets. They were no longer manually doing password resets. They were no longer doing certain tasks manually. They were automating the easy stuff, which meant that tickets that are being raised, things that are being asked for, became more complex. So happiness went up because more difficult problems were being solved properly. But at the same time, because they are difficult, they take more time, so people lose more time. So sometimes there are these seeming contradictions in the data that lead you down these rabbit holes of looking into what the reasons are. And I think that has been both the most surprising, but also the most rewarding to see that this
Mhm.
isn't linear. And a lot of times, like unless you have that open mindset and curiosity to go into those contradictions and not get thrown off by them, that's actually where you're going to find the best nuggets that will like help both sell the idea of experience management to the wider organization, but also where you will find the biggest sort of golden nuggets. And the 13% of tickets leading to 80% of lost time was just scrolling around, playing around in an Excel sheet, and then doing the sum, and then thinking this can't be right. And then we double checked it and triple checked it, and it was right. So yeah, getting curious and authentically caring, just like what you also say in all of your training sessions, that people don't remember what you did or etc. What they do remember is how you made them feel, and I think that's a good way also to position yourself as a consumer of IT services to remember that every single time when thinking about how do we do this experience management thing.
We saw that from the very first, like large, so 20 plus years ago, I'm talking about IDLE V2. We helped a large organization with the training piece of their transformation. And after part of the recommendation, and so they were, they did training, they did software, they brought in consultants. It was a big thing. It was a big company who did a big program and was one of the early US IDLE programs. And we had a meeting, I don't know, 4 months, 6 months down the road, and they were really upset because their MTTR was it was going in the wrong direction. And I was like, well, don't you remember we talked about like you have to look at the questions you're asking now, because of course it is, because the low hanging fruit's all been it's all gone, right? So
Yeah.
those kind of easy in and out tickets and what your service desk is getting to now are the more challenging problems. So you need to flip the data and make sure. And I have a thing about that. Surveys. What do I always say about surveys?
Mhm.
Don't ask questions you already know. And we love to do it in IT. Don't ask questions you already know the answer to. Don't ask questions that you can't do anything about, because you're being disrespectful of people's time. Make your survey as short and meaningful as possible, and only things that are actionable. And then, of course, communicate. Here's why we're taking the data. Here's what we did with the data. And you
Mm.
continue to provide our feedback to us, and we'll continue to act on it. And I think that's such an easy thing for organizations to improve. But not everyone gets on the soapbox with me. What can I say? All right. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I saw that Rocky asked also about dollar value against XLA improvements. And the low-hanging fruit, for example, these automations are often one of the places where you can show we are spending less time now as an IT organization. But actually, the dollar value, there's two sides to it. Are you trying to prove the dollar value of the IT investment, or are you trying to prove the dollar value of, for example, avoided cost losses or avoided productivity losses in the future of end users? And it's cost avoidance versus direct return on investment. It's showing productivity versus, and some of the examples here is that Reckitt, when they started using HappySignals back in 2019 or something, a couple of years in, they were able to show that the lost time had gone down so much that it represented a $250,000 dollar value. And they actually used that in their own organization to then say, look what we achieved can we use this to get extra budget for more people to be hired onto the team to look for even more stuff? So a lot of times, like the dollar value is something that we think the organization wants to see and needs to see. And there are regional differences whether it's the case. But a lot of times, just like the leadership just wants to see that it isn't shelfware, that it is being actively used for improvement initiatives, that it is actively being used. So the communication of being able to, not only to end users, we take the data, we act on it, but also to the leadership to say that like this tool is something that we use on a daily basis to provide the best possible service. Often that is already enough. The dollar values are often questioned as if, like, so many vendors do that. They say that like we'll save you $5 million if you just implement this, and like all these hours of lost productivity, and nobody believes it. So it's like it in that way, just showing we use this actively. So many people are using this, and these are the soft benefits. It's more often enough than you might think.
So I do have one more follow-on question. If you can go
Mhm.
back to the profiles, and as you and I have discussed, I love the way that you guys, this makes so much sense to me. We work with clients and they have personas in place that are very academic or theoretical. And in my mind, they're not, I see these as being super actionable. Have you guys ever broken down the support cost difference for the four profile types? Who's your most expensive and who's your least expensive as an
The
end user organization?
Probably the most expensive is the supported, because they're the ones that will take the most agent time or an IT support time. And a lot of times, because they're not competent, they need to go slow. So it's all about like the time allocation to providing for the supported. The prioritizers are also can be expensive because they might expect to have a walk-in IT support in an office, which is the most expensive form of IT support. And the doers are the hardest to please, but at the same time, if you cater to them in the right way, you can save so much of the resources that would be otherwise put to serving them on a one-to-one basis to actually spending the same time to just give that time that is needed for the supported and the prioritizers. So it's all about like resource allocation. And I think that while we haven't broken down the cost of these different parts, what we do know is that if these profiles are used right, you end up not using the human resource where it wouldn't be necessary, and you end up therefore allocating and liberating more time to use that human resource where it is needed and appreciated.
It's interesting. All right. So we are getting close to time. And I feel like I'm asking all the questions. Me and Rocky. If anybody else have any questions they would like to throw in? And I will say this: I put Zachary's LinkedIn in the chat. Feel free to reach out to him. If you guys want to learn more about what they're doing, he and or his team will come in and do a non-sales just to talk to you again more about the
Absolutely.
benchmark report and drill down further in. As I said in the beginning, that the leadership of the HappySignals team, they're doing this for all the right reasons. They were frustrated with the same old way. And so I find them to be a very giving organization of their time. And even if you have no budget to buy their software, they will still give you time to talk to you. And we collectively sort of want to move this forward into an experience economy.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to give you pointers on how you can build your surveys, how you can build the reporting so that you can follow the best practices that we have used to build the platform, and happy to do so without ever conveying your information to the sales team.
The sales team. All right. So I think well, then I'll do my one other terrible nerdy joke. You ready? Do you know the difference between a used car salesman and a software salesman? And this
Nope.
is not the case for your product. I really believe that. But in general, the used car salesman knows he's lying.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is. All right. So on that terrible joke, yes, please don't tell Greg. Don't tell him about the joke either. Zachary, as always, I want to put a shout out. So Zachary and I and a bunch of some other people on this call are members of a growing grassroots ITSM community called Open Service Community. I am going to sorry, I should have had this ready to go. I'm going to just throw in the link to the LinkedIn events. Give me 1 second. And sorry about the delay here, guys. But we meet Friday mornings, my time. And we also have a midweek Tuesday evening, my time, Wednesday morning, because we are global. And the meetings are this Friday's meeting is BYOT. So if you have any, bring your own topics. If you have any challenge questions, anything you want to celebrate. It really is a great global community of ITSM or service management professionals. It is the highlight of my week every week is our Friday meeting. So anyway, I put that in I put the events link in. You can register for any event that you want, or kind of just go back one and follow the page. And we've got more than 500 followers already. And I just, it's been dynamite discussion week over week. So, right. On that note, I ran us a little bit over. I will tell you guys, I'm very excited because our August presenter is a up and coming. Oh, I'm going to have to, I cannot pronounce her name. This is why I'm not a school teacher. I can't pronounce anyone's names. Sania is coming in. She is a really young, up and coming. I see her as a real thought leader in the service management space, particularly around ServiceNow. And I have been following her blogs for quite a while now. And I reached out to her and asked her to present. And so all of you will get the invitation for next month. But, we're always trying to, those of us that know our retirement date are always trying to identify the next generation. And I think she's going to be a real leader there. So we're really excited to have her. And on that note, my friend, thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow morning. Everyone, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you again in August.